Hey everyone, I want to talk about Stromboli from 1950 by Roberto Rossellini. This is the 60th episode of my 1000 favorite movie series, where I talk about the movies I love the most in a random order. Roberto Rossellini was one of the most pioneering directors in Italian cinema, but for me, he's always been kind of elusive. For example, his Rome Open City is the most prominent early Italian neorealist movie, a genre famous for using non actors and a documentary style of shooting. Yet it uses professional actors and has always felt too polished a production with an air of convention, to me at least. His next movie, Paisan, felt much more typically Italian neorealist, but his movie after that, Germany Year Zero, takes place in Germany. He then made a series of films with Ingrid Bergman, a Hollywood superstar, including Journey to Italy, also starring George Sanders, which continues to puzzle me even after several viewings. He later made a film in India, which really brought his documentary style to the fore, but then abandoned this rough and tumble style for more formalist, perhaps stagey works about Italian history, including his work in TV that ended his career. I enjoy seeing directors evolve, but him being so difficult to pin down has kind of intimidated me from talking about him in generalities. Although, in my opinion, the ability to do this is probably overrated. I think the auteur theory has kind of brainwashed us to try and neatly fit each work into the broader picture of the director's vision in life, whereas my feeling is that more stock should be placed into the individual text of each movie. Don't stretch too much. Don't try to go beyond the framework of the movie too much. That's my philosophy. What I'm trying to say is that Rossellini has made movies that I enjoy very much throughout his varied career, and Stromboli is most certainly one of them. It's the first movie he made with Ingrid Bergman, and it resulted in a scandalous affair, both were married at the time, as well as a child. It was such a big deal that it was even being talked about and denounced on the Senate floor in America. Maybe the gossip was so pervasive that everyone lost sight of the movie itself, which was a critical and commercial failure in America. But like I said before, let's strip away all the possible metatextual elements about this movie, separated from the real life love affair, and look at the movie for what it is on its own terms, which is an elemental love story about a woman who comes to live on a volcanic island. We begin in an internment camp in which Karen, played by Bergman, found herself in after the war. Across barbed wire, she meets a man called Antonio, played by Mario Vitale. They soon marry as a means for Karen to escape the camp, and they go back to live in his hometown of Stromboli, which happens to have an active volcano. She doesn't take it well, calling it filth, among other things, saying that a woman like her doesn't belong there. She resents the other villagers who criticize her, the island's way of life, and even her husband and his pay. Up till now, she hasn't been a very sympathetic character, but she gradually starts to try to change and make the best of her situation, at which point kind of a flip happens. She becomes more pleasant, friendly, and sympathetic, but her efforts get struck down by those around her. When she renovates her house by painting it and so on, the villagers reject her offer to come in, saying that she lacks modesty. When she becomes friendly with a woman with a bad reputation and visits her, her husband scolds her. When she's friendly with another man and they enjoy time together, this gets misconstrued by everyone as scandalous. It's like she can't win. Combine this with the cruelty towards animals she sees and the volcano becoming active, and she gets desperate to leave again. So desperate, in fact, that she climbs the volcano in order to escape. I think watching the story play out is very engaging, but a few things really make the movie memorable. For one, the fact that Ingrid Bergman is in this is pretty wild and how much it jars with Italian neorealist traditions, which non actors usually star. Here's one of the biggest movie stars in the world on this poor volcanic island. It should be unbelievable, but Bergman blends right in. I guess probably because she fits her character, a woman out of place. In any case, Rossellini makes the most out of her, and not just as a glamorous figure, although it's possible that Bergman's never looked sexier or more beautiful than she does here. There are many scenes in the movie that focus only on her and her isolation. After her husband leaves the house every morning to go to work, there's a great sense of her passing the time by herself, and Bergman hooks us in every second. There's an extended sequence that's a great example of this, which is the first morning she has alone. It starts with her moping around the house in tears that doesn't seem melodramatic, like it probably would be with most other actors. We barely hear a baby crying in the distance, which compels her to leave to try and find it, and we get her trying to navigate a maze outside. Some of the dullest scenes I've ever seen are probably ones of characters aimlessly walking around, but Bergman always draws our attention, inviting us to go inside her head and feel her feelings. And what exactly is inside her head? Well, her situation is clear enough, but I think the richness of this movie lies in tying the environment to her internal struggles, which is why I said earlier that it's an elemental movie. How does the movie do this? Well, take the sequence I was just talking about. The maze that Bergman wanders through might be said to mirror her internal confusion, but the end of the scene is also very telling. She puts her head down next to a small plant, and she slowly takes it and gently rubs it on her face and puts it in her mouth, which soothes her and gives her a brief moment of peace. It's like she responds to nature in a really deep way, for the positive, like in this scene, or the scene where she's lazing on a rock and ends up playing in the water, but also for the negative, which we can see when Rossellini cuts to the ominous volcano throughout the movie. I love movies where the environment and nature play a big role, not just in the atmosphere, but also complementing and affecting the characters, and Stromboli is a good example of this. But unlike Michelangelo Antonioni, a slightly later Italian director who would use the environment totally seamlessly, revolutionizing cinema in the process, Rossellini does it primarily in a more documentary way, aside from the plant example I said earlier. Take the shots of the volcano when it's active towards the end. When the people are waiting it out on the boats, we get many shots of the volcano that feel almost like stock footage and tend to be a little repetitive. It's indistinguishable from a documentary at times like these, which can feel a bit awkward if I'm being honest, including even in the famous tuna fishing scene, which, while great, lasts a bit too long in my opinion, kind of taking us out of the narrative. This isn't entirely meant as criticism, as blending fiction and documentary is perhaps a stylistic trait that Rossellini is most famous for. I'm always up for seeing real footage of things that are far away from me and my lived experiences, such as just about everything that's in Stromboli. There's a strong sense of realism that the documentary style helps to lend it, regardless of how awkwardly it may be utilized at times. However, nothing can prepare for the ending, in which the story, character, environment, and documentary elements all come to a head and reinvent each other. I'll give a spoiler alert to this, one of the most famous endings in Italian neorealism. In her desperation, Karen climbs a mountain in order to get to the other side, but loses her luggage on the way, becoming overwhelmed by the immensity and sheer challenge the environment poses. The shots where she can't take it anymore, and the blackness of the ground and beyond, make it look like she's looking into the pits of hell, right on the precipice. It's so powerful that she gets reduced to a blubbering mess. If she took solace from a small little plant earlier in the movie, this hellish landscape of the volcano has just the opposite effect on her. But after she wakes up in the morning, it's like she's changed completely, experienced a revelation. Helped by the best musical moment in the film, we seem to experience the same change that she has. She remembers that she's pregnant and cries out to God to help give her the strength to go on. It's almost like God worked through the volcano to give her a spiritual awakening and newfound faith, so we might also conclude that God was there the whole time. But that's just a possible religious interpretation. It's a very ambiguous ending, any way you slice it, like the fact that she's still reduced to tears even after her revelation, and of course, in the question of what happens to her next. This kind of daring ending helped to usher in modern cinema, I think, tying up everything the movie was up to before in the process. Now, like a few other of Rossellini's movies, there are different cuts of the movie in different languages. Discounting the butchered version released in America in 1950, there are two cuts of the film. The first times I saw this movie was the Italian cut, titled Stromboli Terra di Dio. Since it's in Italian, I assumed this was a proper release, but to make this video, I watched the English version for the first time, which is actually the longest version, coming in at 106 minutes. Neither of these versions is official per se, so it's really up to you to choose which one you prefer. I was comparing both of them as I was watching, and besides some relatively minor cuts to speed up the pacing, the biggest difference is in the music. The Italian version uses much more music, and a movie that already has quite a bit of it, whereas I think the English version has a better balance, not afraid of giving us quiet moments and letting us think and reflect. This, and the fact that the minor cuts do eliminate some shots of Bergman's isolation, which comprise many of the best moments of the film, is why I personally prefer the longer English version. It's also good to hear Ingrid Bergman's real voice, even if we have to hear some difficult English accents by the husband and villagers on the way. But in neither version, here are my favorite moments. Actually, that's not true. My first moment was actually cut from the Italian version, only in the English one. It's a small scene, but it's another time we get to revel in Bergman's isolation. She's in bed. Her husband brings her a tuna that he caught. He kisses her and leaves. In the Italian version, we cut here to Bergman dressed and determined to pretty up the room, but in the English version, the scene plays on in her pajamas as she gets up to examine the tuna and to sit all tired and mopey in the chair before going back to bed and relaxing with a drink. It's about as inconsequential a scene as you can get, but I like it to be able to see this big star, 34 or 35 years old and as beautiful as can be, looking and acting like a normal person. Of course, the longer scene of her wandering through the maze I described earlier is a better scene, but I want to highlight this one just to show that she's so magnetic that she can do just about anything and make it interesting. Also, besides the Italian version removing this, before she gets out of bed and she's with her husband, we have one of many examples of unnecessary background music in the Italian version that's not in the English version, which helps to illustrate one reason why I prefer the latter. A scene that's more consequential is this one, which involves a character that I haven't mentioned yet, this priest. He's the only character that Karen can confide in the earlier part of the film, and now a little more than halfway through, she meets him to try to get him to help her leave the island. He tells her about some money that's been donated to the island, and Karen tries to convince him to give it to her to escape. I love the drama in this scene as it develops, which ends up with her trying to seduce him. A scandalous idea, but is played pretty sensitively by both of them, remaining subtle and implied, with the priest putting an end to it when the tension ramps up. Finally, I hope I didn't sound too dismissive of the tuna hunting scene earlier, because it's definitely one of the highlights of the movie. It's an epic sequence with a slow and satisfying build up, and just seeing the huge tuna is exciting. But in the end, what I love about Stromboli is its innovative use of its star, putting Ingrid Bergman on a volcanic island and seeing what happens. Well, I guess technically not a lot does happen on the surface, but the movie does a great job of letting us peer into her internal feelings and struggles through her surroundings and isolation. I'm not sure if it's my favorite Rossellini movie, but I'd say it's at least his most entertaining one for me, making it one of my 1000 favorite movies. Thanks for watching my video. Have you seen Stromboli? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think of all my favorite movies as my friends, and I think of my audience as friends too. And don't forget, if you want to help me complete this 1000 favorite movies epic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much.